Hi, welcome to the Andrew Buckle video tutorial about Affinity Photo and creating patterns using selections. We've got a design here, very quickly created using a selection. Now you can use images, you can use gradients, you can use type and much more. And you can also use patterns to create patterns. So I'm just going to run through this now. So I'm going to start back, completely fresh document. Now I'm going to use a gradient. Key thing here, layer and new layer. And then go to the gradient tool. You can find that in the tools. And along here, you've got the context. So there's the key thing, show context toolbar. For some weird reason, my context toolbar always seems to vanish. I don't know why, it always seems to deselect and disappear. So maybe you're having the same issue. It's always nice to have this bar because you've got all the options here. Okay, so with that, simply add a gradient. And I'm going to go for elliptical. Now you can of course vary this, and once you do that you just go over here and you can see the little plus. You hover over this line, not there, but you can just go there because you've got this little dash there. Just hover there and then click and then just change it. Maybe go for red. And you can create a much more interesting, I think, gradient than before. So what you can do, you can now go in selection. Just go over here, and this is really basic whole thing. But I'm going to go further, obviously, a bit later. But first, just go to selection, and you can use any of the others as well. Key thing here, feather. Make certain the feather's 0. Though you can get some very interesting designs if you put the feather up to 40 or 50. But just for default, just select that area there. And then, once you've done that, what you can do, go to layer and new pattern layer from selection. And that's it. Go to the move tool and then you can see your design and you can move that around. You can also rotate it. Obviously it's not going to be very interesting because it's obviously, that's all that happens when you rotate it. It could be considered interesting as well, I guess. Sadly you can't shear it. Or can you? Yes you can. Do you know what? I've done that quite a few times. Quite often I hover over there and it doesn't allow me to shear. Then now, just as I say, it doesn't allow you to shear, it does. So clearly, you've got to go to a certain point, just there, and you can shear it. So you can create some very interesting designs. But it should be noted, sometimes it does seem to not allow you to do it. And I've tried a few times where I just can't get that little cursor to appear. Okay, so I've got my design there. So that's the basic run through. However, you can of course do a lot more with different types of selections and using feather as well. So I'm going to go back to completely, well, Affinity just crashed. I actually had to reset everything. And that's another tip that's very useful. If you want to reset everything, hold down the control key when you start up Affinity. And that resets everything. Well, you've got options to reset. Very useful to find out. Also, it unfortunately meant I had to re-register again to go to the Affinity registration, which is very odd. However, now I'm back. So what I can do, I can create this design. What you can do, you don't have to use rectangle. You can use freehand, you can use elliptical, etc. So I'm just going to go with freehand. Now you can set the feather to, and that creates some very nice sort of cut throughs as well. So it's quite useful to totally don't ignore it. So I'm just going to set to like 24. And what you can then draw is just all kinds of different designs. And just there. So you've got that. What you can then do, just go to a layer and new pattern layer from selection. And you can then see, just go over here to the move tool and you can move it around and you can see below. So if I go to the layers, which of course now probably tucked away over here because it's moved. Yep, there it is. You can still see you've got pattern layer. So you've got a pattern layer which you can move around and resize, as well as you can shear. You can also rotate. So you can rotate that design and do many other things. Now I'm just going to keep it like that, perfectly reasonable. But also I'm going to remove, if you want, you don't have to, of course. You could keep the underlying design, but you can deselect it. And now, of course, what you can see is I've got obviously white. Perfectly reasonable because there's no obviously background now. What you can do, you can just go to layer, new layer, and just going to move that down to there. And I'm just going to fill with black, just because I want a black background. And there's the black background. Okay, so I've got my design in the way that I want it now with that pattern layer. Well, what I can also do, I can always duplicate that pattern layer. So layer and duplicate. You can see you can create designs like that. And you can resize that. You don't have to keep them consistently the same. You can if you want to, of course. You can maybe just slightly offset it, perfectly reasonable as well. But also what you can do, you can go to layer and you can go down to new layer filter layer and distort, maybe like twirl. Now, by default, doesn't look like much has happened. In fact, nothing has happened because the settings are so low. So just change that and you can then see your design. Now, this doesn't apply all the way outwards. So if you've got this, and you can also change the blending as well if you want to use that. You've got normal there. So you can close that and you can see that twirl is added there and you can resize. And you can see, of course, outside it's totally untouched. It's only applied at that central point. Now, not all the live filter layers work the same way. So you might find different results. Say like you apply blur, that's obviously a different issue. So you can move that around. What you can also do, of course, you can still rotate. You can see that and shear as well. And of course, what you can also do, you can go and add another live filter layer. So layer, new live filter layer, and distort. Maybe go for ripple or one of the other ones. But I'm going to go for twirl again. Again, by default, it's not very powerful. I don't know why they do that. I must admit, I would have the default a bit more sort of so you can actually see it would make more sense. But however, there it is, and you can move the origin point. So you can have different origin points. And again, you can go with different blending modes if you want to create all kinds of different effects there. Normal. So you've got two applied to that design there. And again, you can still select that and you can still modify that design and move that around. But what you can also do, now I've found that sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm not going to say it's perfect because that would be wrong to say. But you can go to layer and you can merge visible. So merge visible and you can see what happens. Now, the reason the thing crashed, and also I was finding that it was creating a blocky design. So that's why I refreshed everything. I thought, right, just let's do a complete refresh of Affinity. I don't particularly like to do that, but I just had a few issues with it, so I thought I'll refresh it. And then that seems to remove that blockiness. But when you do that, when you've now just rasterized it or merged everything, you just get a pixel layer. And you can remove the underlying ones if you want. And also you can keep the black as well. But now you've got this design here. So you've got that pixel layer, which of course is no longer a pattern. You can't change the pattern setting. But what you can do, because it's pixel, you can now go and apply another selection. So again, go down to the selection and just quickly look for the selection. Oh, there it is. Must admit, when I would put lasso, quite often I end up looking up and down. I'm just going to go for a rectangle, but you can use elliptical, perfectly reasonable as well. And again, you can change the feathering if you want. That creates some interest. Maybe make it 39 or something, and just create a selection like that. And then what you can do, you can go to layer and new pattern layer from selection, and you can see then you've got, go back to the move tool, you've got another selection design, and you've got this gap in between. I must admit, when I first did this, this new pattern feature, I suddenly found this gap and I was thinking, this is a bit weird. But it's of course the feathering. If you want that nice gap. And again, you can still do exactly the same as before. You can rotate, do all those sorts of things. And you've got this a pattern layer. It's a key thing, pattern layer. And of course, you can then go to live filter layer again. So layer, new live filter layer, and distort, and maybe twirl. And again, defaults, of course, to a very pointless setting, but you can then set it obviously, and you can modify the origin point there. And then also you can use blending mode, so you can see you can go through to that if you want, or just use normal. And you can add another one, new live filter and distort. I like to actually combine multiple ones. It's just okay, that didn't do. For some weird reason, new live filter layer, distort, and twirl, which is what I want. Oh, that's it, got this time. What I wanted was another layer of twirl. I don't know why it didn't. But you can reposition that. So you can see you can create a twirl there and a twirl there. Or any other position, of course. Key thing here, you've got twirl and twirl. Both can be edited, so you can double click on either one. You bring up the panel and you can set them independently. So you can see that, you can change that as well independently. And you've still got the pattern layer, so you can still modify that. And again, you notice it doesn't change anything outside, but you can still resize that. Now what you can do, you can of course put them all together like that, and you can also remove the background layer if you don't want that one. But because it sometimes confuses, then you've got that layer there selected. Oops, that. Just want to select that. Then I can go to layer and duplicate layer, and it just duplicates the group. And again, you see now you've got two entries there. And again, you can see the underlying design as well. And you've got an option here. Obviously, you can change blending mode for that. Again, you go for maybe add, and you can still move this design and it's still editable. So you can change that, and you can still go to this one, and that's still editable, and that can be moved around. And these can be, again, edited independently. So double click on there, bring up that, and you can modify that. Though, to be honest, it doesn't seem to be changing much particularly. Oh, there it is. It is changing there. This is one thing I've noticed for some weird reason, and that's why another reason why I refreshed my Affinity. It wasn't updating things in the way that I thought it should. So anyway, something to be aware of. So now I've got that design there, and you can see you can make some very complex combinations of effects, pattern layers, much more. And of course, what you can still do, once you've done all that, you can still go to layer and you can merge visible. Merge the whole lot into one thing. And again, you can always remove this. So you've still got those if you want to bring them back. So you've got this design, and then of course what you can do, you can still go over here and freehand create selection from that. And again, layer and new pattern from selection. Again, go to the move tool, and this is the key thing. And it always has to work off a pixel layer. That's the key thing. And you can see your design there. And of course, you can still see the underlying design. And again, what you can do, you can always go to layer and you can duplicate. Just a pattern layer, which you can duplicate and modify, and also change it differently and independently from the other one. And of course, what you can do, you can also go to blending modes again and change blending modes. Maybe like lighten. So you can see you can create all kinds of weird and wonderful combinations of design, which you can still, of course, rotate and also shear if you want to. Just hold it just slightly a different position there. So you can shear that design. And of course, once you're finished, go to layer and you can merge visible. So all merge down into a visible. So you can create some very unique designs. And you know, I've got a pixel layer here. Obviously, I'm not going to do any more pattern work on that, but I just wanted to show you the number of combinations you can do with rectangle, elliptical, and all those sort of things. You can create also selections, different positions all over the place. Then layer and new light filter layer. You can go to distort, liquefy, noise, apply all the standard effects, or maybe just go to filters and just use distort and like deform. So you can just quickly add deform there and distort that design. And of course, what you can do, if you wanted to, maybe this is really pushing it to the extreme. And again, my favourite one is similarity. For the end result similarity, click apply. You've got that. What you can do, you can still go over here and again, rectangle or freehand and just draw. And again, you don't have to create, you can create all kinds of very abstract shapes for your pattern. Got that design, layer, and new pattern layer from selection. And again, move tool. And you can see design there. And of course, again, exactly the same as before, layer and duplicate if you want to. Duplicate it and then create combinations. And you can you can see you can just extend it to end up with some very unusual imagery. And of course, what you can also do, you've got all these options here for additional effects as well. So if you want to, you can recolor it. I mean, I haven't done that, but what you can do, you can just go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and I'm just going to go for one very quick, HSL. So you can just change the design there. Now that's applied to the whole thing, but what you can do, you can just drag that down, put it to that, and it's just applied to that pattern layer. So you've got this weird combination of obviously the purple, which is just with that adjustment, and the other one is still as before, but without the adjustment, of course. And of course, what you can do, you can always go and add additional live filter layers, distort, maybe liquefy, etc., or lighten, or blur. I'm just going to look down for me. I just choose one, otherwise I'll just go backwards and forwards. So you can see you can create all kinds of different designs there. And then layer and merge visible front. And that's it. Otherwise, I will just continue adding more and more complexity to it. But you can see the sort of thing. But I have noticed, like I say, there's weird blockiness appears occasionally. Don't know why, where it suddenly doesn't end up with the what you expect as a result. But definitely recommend trying these tools, the various selection tools, and with feathering really works really well. And also, of course, combining pattern layers in many different ways. Well, I hope you found this tutorial of interest. Please subscribe to the Graphic Extra channel. Always adding new tutorials about Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, Publisher, Critter, Photoshop, Illustrator, etc., etc. Also, please add some comments. Always appreciated, because, you know, what things have I done right? What things have I done wrong? What things didn't I explain well enough? Maybe you can see other things that I could do with this, other than maybe delete it after seeing the end result. It's not particularly the world's most elegant design, I will admit. And also a dislike or like. Thank you much.